Welcome. We're so thankful that you're joining us in our Climate Justice pre-recorded webinar that is happening today. I'm Kathleen Stone, and I'm in the Office of Economic and Environmental Justice with United Methodist Women, and I'm just really thrilled that we have this opportunity to share with you some of the things that we're thinking about and working on. And with us is Jacqui Patterson, who's the Director of the Environmental and Climate Justice Program with NAACP. We're hoping that this webinar brings us together through looking at the lens through which United Methodist women have chosen to view the concerns around climate change. As Christian women of a Wesleyan heritage, we're motivated by a deep care and love for those things that make for life, and are determined that it's important that our belief in love and care be the determinant of how we approach our environment. We know now that we're all interdependent, and that when the canary fails, we also hurt. When the bees no longer buzz, we're significantly affected. When the soil and the sky, the rivers and the streams can no longer support life, our lives are affected. John Wesley had a deep understanding of the creation around him and its care, and his 4 pillars of decision-making create a powerful impetus for concrete actions to protect people and the environment, springing from our scriptural heritage, our tradition, including Wesley's social justice ethic and his deep reverence for created order, our reason through the bishop study and through scientific consensus, and our experience. We form a powerful impetus for decision-making in favor of care for creation and love for our neighbor that would propel us into new actions which effectively care for people and the environment upon which we depend. The goal of this webinar is to provide a basic primer for how UMW are approaching the degradation of our environment. From the ways we have failed to care for the rich biodiversity of the creation to the smoke spewing into air, land, and water, all these things are part of that which is producing changes in our climate. Aligning with our 150 years of our UMW work with those who face very difficult realities, we're interested in being in solidarity and care and good and right relationships with those who are experiencing firsthand the cumulative and disproportionate consequences from the lack of care for our environment. We're focusing our work, our research, and our actions on those who have already profited little from the ways we've treated the earth and who are suffering disproportionately. In this time of changing climate, as we saw in New Orleans, Sandy, and other large storms around the world, persons who have little economic backing face extraordinary pressure, including ill health effects, displacement, migration, hunger, and death. And very significantly, it's persons of color who are more at risk of climate change than those who have had the legalized privilege and the economic opportunities that have come from being white. Here's a few statistics from NAACP's Climate Justice Program. 71% of African Americans live in counties in the U.S. in violation of pollution standards, and 78% of those from South or Central America live in these areas. 68% of African Americans live within 30 miles of coal-fired power plants. Coal-fired power plants are not only big contributors to climate change, but also emit an incredibly dangerous smoky emission full of particulate matter, heavy metals, and these cause asthma, cancer, developmental, reproductive, and hormonal issues. There's a statistic that says an African American family making $50,000 per year is more likely to live near a toxic facility than a white American family making $15,000 per year. Incinerators, garbage dumps, industrial manufacturing, all these are overwhelmingly located in communities in which persons of color live, study, work, pray, and play. And although people of color bear the brunt of the pollutants and toxins produced in our way of life, they reap little economic benefit. These statistics and understandings are staggering, especially when you realize that some of these pollutants do not just affect the one who lives presently in proximity to the source of these pollutants, but actually cross generational lines from mother to child. They bioaccumulate and are stored in the body and transmitted from mother to child and stay with the child and are multiplied in the child from his or her current environment as he or she grows older. So someone who lived near a coal-fired power plant's grandchild is more susceptible to health issues because his grandmother lived where she lived. UMW is extraordinarily concerned about the economic and health disparities evident across race, gender, and nationality lines, and the ways environmental hazards have been legally dumped in some neighborhoods. How did this happen? Let's take a brief look at the development. When the U.S. was founded, the radicalness of those who found themselves in the burgeoning possibilities of the soon-to-be U.S. from Europe was the way they determined to organize the decision-making in the new nation. Their vision of democracy set the stage for a new way of ruling. This was actually adopted from the Six Nations of the Iroquois Confederacy. But this new democracy had the capacity to self-check for abuses of power. Their limitation, however, was that it was men of British European descent, and especially those with educational and economic inheritance of a certain aristocratic way of life, that they ensured would be the decision makers. They felt a particular call that God had privileged white British male aristocracy to be in that position. In this course of making rules for the new nation, they created racial categories which privileged white persons of European college-educated background, persons of color, whether that be indigenous peoples they found in the new land or those enslaved from Africa. These were considered by those Englishmen simply incapable of making these rules and thus needed to be subject to their decision. As time went on, rules were made upon rules so that the profits of a growing industrialized economy would go to people like them. And as garbage, smoke, waste began to be legally located in the neighborhoods, they moved away from those neighborhoods, and those who worked in the factories and mines lived close by. These were where impoverished people and almost all people of color lived. Eventually, these became laws. The waste and toxins would go into certain industrialized zones which were called sacrifice zones. And these sacrifice zones are places where all the industrial waste, the municipal waste, the toxic discharges are legally dumped for others' benefit. And thus the resources which God gave us to make a good life for all were skewed. These rules, these privileges for some, and these damages to others, this injustice based on a false premise of superiority and a system to support that superiority has had legalized supports. UMW is determined that we will magnify the voices, the struggles, the incredible courage of those who live, work, pray, and play in these sacrifice zones because, number one, our faith and sense of ethics and fairness, justice and love compels us to do so. And number two, when we focus on the conditions of those on whom the waste is dumped, we begin to understand the interdependence of our lives. We recognize the brokenness, and we work together to heal. As was articulated in the papal encyclical that's just out right now, you can't trash the planet without trashing people. So given this UMW angle into the approach to the issue area of climate justice, we've asked Jacqui Patterson, Environmental and Climate Justice Director for NAACP, an incredible voice, presence, knowledge base, wealth of information, and with so many stories to share. We've asked her to talk about some of the ways she sees this playing out today. Jacqui, would you join us for a few minutes?
Sure. Thank you so much for having me, and I'm excited about all the folks who have chosen to tune in and hear this important message and to play on the actions that you will be taking in your communities and in relationship with your communities to address these concerns. So I wanted to give a sense of some of the ways that we've, as Kathleen said, seen some of these issues play out in communities and in systems, and then we'll talk further, hopefully, about how we see solutions moving forward. So we've talked about some of the historical underpinnings of climate injustice to today, and how that actually plays out is a mix of different systems that that combine to lead to the impacts of climate change in our communities and in our lives. So whether it is the extractive industries that have scourged our mountaintops, or or have gouged out the earth in a way that has caused not only hurt to the earth, but also to the folks who are engaged in the gouging. So when we're talking about the extractive energy around extraction of natural resources, we're also talking about extraction of cheap labor without regard to the persons who are providing that labor. For example, since 1968, 76,000 coal miners have died of black lung disease, while the mining industry has fought tooth and nail against having regulations around coal mine dust. Last year, the first ever regulations around coal mine dust were passed. But again, this is on the backs of 76,000 coal miners who have died while the industry had no regard for their health and well-being as they've been toiling under the earth to extract the coal that runs our electricity system. But and now we see coal combustion where the burning of coal disproportionately happens in communities of color and low-income communities, which means that those are the communities that face the health and social, educational, and economic impacts of the coal burning in their area. For example, if you're African American, 68% of African Americans live within 30 miles of a coal-fired power plant. The types of toxins that come out of those plants include sulfur dioxide, nitrogen oxide, mercury, arsenic, lead, and a number of those toxins are tied to respiratory illnesses, and you see that play out in terms of the health statistics of African Americans, with African Americans being more likely to die of lung disease, but less likely to smoke. And also the African American children are 5 times more likely to enter to the hospital from asthma attacks and twice as likely to die from asthma attacks. And we see how that ties to other social, economic, and educational issues when we know that in addition to asthma attacks, we have the lead exposure, which leads to attention deficit disorder and attention hyperactive disorder. And so if you have kids who aren't able to pay attention in school, or kids who are out of school because of poor air quality days, and then you heap that on the fact that if you're living next to a toxic facility, your property values are 15% lower on average, which means that the amount of money going into the school system, because they're financed by the property values, is less. Then you really have schools and children who have the deck stacked against them in terms of success and progress. And for the NAACP, who also works a lot on the school to prison pipeline, we recognize that if kids aren't on the grade level by the 3rd grade, they're more likely to enter to the criminal justice system. And so we see all of this as being inextricably linked. And then exacerbating that is the fact that if your child is out of school, then they can't be out of school alone for the most part unless they're older children. So you have parents having to take off of work to pick up their child from school or to keep their child home from school, and that means lost days of work, depending on their situation, potentially lost days of pay, and also, depending on their situation, potentially lost opportunities for advancement in the workplace. So you really see the myriad interconnections there, and that's just with coal combustion alone, not to mention other extractive industries, whether it's uranium mining, and the fact that when I was out in Kayenta, Arizona, there were signs all over actually advertising for uranium miners, mining workers' health centers. So the fact that they actually had health centers dedicated to uranium miners really gives a sense of that it's just an accepted norm that uranium miners are going to be differentially sickened by the very work that they do. So whether it's the workers or the communities, we see all these negative impacts of the extractive energy industry, but then the same industry also is impacting our climate, and we see that how that plays out in terms of the impacts, whether you're next to you're living in a coastal region and are facing sea level rise, or you're living in places that are constantly ravaged by the increasing severity and frequency of tornadoes, or the same in the Gulf region where folks are being ravaged by the increasing intensity and severity of hurricanes. We see all of these impacts playing out in folks' communities, and at the same time, the same folks who are being disproportionately impacted by the pollution that drives climate change and the results of the pollution on the impact side, the folks are also tend to be more likely to be politically disenfranchised. So we hear a lot about voting rights, and we've seen the recent kind of repeal of voting rights and the active efforts around voter suppression. And as a result, the folks who are making the policies aren't necessarily making the policies for the constituents who are most impacted by the policy making that's happening. Instead, you see policy making that keeps the concentration of resources in the hands of a wealthy few, and it perpetuates this kind of reckless extraction of human and natural resources. So we see these systemic challenges around the combination of social, political, economics as all interconnected, and we see that as a result, the action that we take needs to be intersectional as well. So just to also further illustrate some of the challenges that we see in terms of those interconnections, when we're in Louisiana after Hurricane Isaac in 2012, there was a conversation with Senator Mary Landrieu to ask her why it was the Plaquemines Parish, which had been ravaged by the Hurricane Katrina, and had also been ravaged by the BP oil drilling disaster, why it was that their levees weren't shored up the way other levees, because we've heard the Army Corps of Engineers has been extensively engaged in reinforcing levees. So they were asked why they weren't shored up like other communities and other levees. And Mary Landrieu asked that same question to the Army Corps of Engineers, and they told her that they used a ranking system that had a formula that was applying points to each of the levees, and the points that were applied were based on what the economic impact would be if that levee was breached. So didn't have any consideration for how many people were there or any kind of ways that the people who were there might be differentially vulnerable. It was all about the money, and unfortunately, that is our challenge. And so several of the questions there are who approved this formula, who made the formula, and who decided who would have input on the approval, on the making and the approval of the formula. And for us, in terms of action, that points to the need to make sure that we have folks at all levels. It points to the importance of the political system and the decision-making that goes into these things. It points to the importance of making sure that there's transparency in that decision-making. I mean, this kind of decision that has such mass import on this whole community shouldn't come out in an interview on CNN. There should be transparency so that people know that these are the kind of decisions that are being made and really literally putting their lives at stake. And so we need to be thinking about who's involved in decision-making, who's at the decision-making table, and then also on the educational side, we would love to see more diversity in terms of who's engaged around the Army Corps of Engineers in terms of developing those formulas. So we actually think about formulas that take into account more than just sheer financial numbers, not only taking human life into account, but also thinking about, even as it relates to the financial numbers, there needs to be some nuance to that equation to say, if I, let's say if I lost $6,000 worth of my house, that might just be my bedroom. But if someone lives in a one-room house, a $6,000 loss might be their entire house. So we need to really be thinking about relativity when it comes to loss, and so those numbers aren't absolute, but they should be looking at how people, how families, how businesses even are impacted in a more nuanced way. So, and again, that really ties together the social, the political, the economic, so all of our systems. So I will pause there and hand the mic back over to Kathleen. But I just wanted to give a few of those examples that really illustrate the interconnected systems that have gotten us to where we are and that are continuing to drive a system where there's winners and losers really in this climate justice equation. So thank you, Kathleen. I'll hand it back to you.
Jacqui, thank you so much. That's so powerful and so powerfully stated, and we're appreciative of those kind of interconnections, which is one of the things that, as you know, and this is why we're working together, we continue to come upon with United Methodist Women and try to get into our material. So thank you so much for that incredibly articulate piece. So let me ask you, my fellow UMW, a few questions. Do you know where your garbage goes to? Do you know what source your energy comes from or who's there? Is it from renewable sources? Or is it from a coal mine or mountaintop removal? Do you know what happens during mountaintop removal to the people who have lived there? Is your gas coming from a fracked community? Do you know the amount of water used to make a single sheet of paper is 2 gallons? And do you know who it is that lives in the neighborhood of the paper company? Do you know if that piece of paper has been treated in a chlorine process which yields the cancer-producing chemical dioxin? Whose neighborhood was that piece of paper been produced in, and where will it be disposed of? Do you know where your food comes from? Do you know the chemicals that might be sprayed on those crops? Or do you know if the workers on that farm are protected from those pollutants? If you're like I am, you don't. And the reason we don't know these things is because there are policy decisions that were made that distanced us from one another. There are many things that support our day-to-day life that we have no idea about their manufacturing process or the people that live near that manufacturing or the disposal. Most of us have been able to live without knowing or caring where our good deals come from. We might even think that a justice process is in place to take care of grievances. But many times, most times, this just isn't so. Is this the way God would have us live in relationship with each other? As any of you who are concerned and working in this area know, counteracting this deep problem is fettered with many who are indifferent and simply lack understanding or would seriously rather not know. And it takes a real wrestle, a fight, a commitment from those of us who really want to do something about it all. And we have to learn how to do it and how to be together and support one another and develop accountability without judgment, because this is hard and we need one another. We need to know how to respond to the urgency of the situation while also confronting the oppressive experience of some still being the rulers and others still considered incapable, when it's actually that the rules have created the overwhelming conditions that are almost impossible to address, especially for the marginalized. Yet this is the thing. There is so much to hope in. Right now, fights are going on at dramatic levels over transitioning to a just energy policy, an energy policy that would protect communities from the horrors of dirty processing of coal and oil and the fracking of gas, and will give those communities the income that can come from alternative sources. All over this country and even around the world, those overburdened communities are developing energy co-ops and using abandoned places and lands for the purposes of energy development from renewable clean energy sources. I know Jacqui's seen quite a few of these, and so we've asked her to share a bit about some of the models she knows about in the area of energy development. Jacqui, would you share with us some of those things?
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Very happy to share. It's been encouraging to see that folks have really begun to reclaim the land, to be able to envision alternate ways of advancing clean, first and foremost, energy efficiency, because we waste 80% of the energy that is generated. So we really have a long way to go to tighten up the type of energy, the amount of energy that we need in the first place. Unfortunately, we see waste, whether it's in idling vehicles or the lights that are on unnecessarily, or the air conditioning that's running unnecessarily. There's just a rampant waste of energy that we see day in and day out in this country in particular. And so first off, we have communities who are doing everything from installing smart meters to doing various energy audits to help to decrease the amount of energy that's being used. And while doing that, people have been able to actually create jobs. We have folks out in LA that with the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers who were able to use recovery funds to train low-income, unskilled folks in communities to be able to go out and do the energy audits, and then to be able to go forth and do weatherization and retrofitting. We've seen on the policy side in places like Mississippi, where the Public Service Commission demanded that the Mississippi Power Company, which provides a lot of the electricity in Mississippi along with the rural electric co-ops, but they demanded that they offer a certain amount of energy efficiency incentives and aids to their ratepayers. And we've seen where there have been partnerships between utility companies and communities to make sure that the folks are taking advantage of the energy efficiency options. We've seen great models with rural electric co-ops, like with Curtis Gwynn in the Roanoke, North Carolina area, where he has been able to, a lot of times the utility companies who are seeking to preserve profits will push back and say, oh, if we do energy efficiency measures, we'll actually have to increase rates because these are investments that we don't have to be able to make, and so we would raise rates if we increase energy efficiency, which is counterintuitive to say the least. And so in the Roanoke Rural Electric Co-op, Curtis Wynn said, well, we need to innovate the utility business model instead of always pushing these rate increases onto ratepayers. So they actually did what's called on-bill financing, where they help with retrofits and weatherization and other energy efficiency measures at the household level, and then they integrated it into the bills, but because they're actually decreasing the amount of energy they're using, it's called on-bill financing, but because they're actually decreasing the amount of energy they're using, they're coming out either better off, or as they pay for the energy efficiency retrofits, it's actually being paid for in the savings that they're realizing. So there's all these different models to be able to advance energy efficiency, and we need to see those scaled up. And on the clean energy side, we are seeing what they're calling the rooftop revolution, whether it's individuals being able to put solar on their rooftops or communities who are coming together to co-finance community solar gardens, where there might be a solar array that's not necessarily on the roof, but it's co-owned by folks in the community, both homeowners and renters alike, so they can get their energy from clean energy through collective processes. We see where people are doing community aggregated purchase of renewable electricity credits, like our headquarters at the NAACP in Baltimore joined up with different nonprofit organizations and church faith houses, as well as community members, and we're all collectively buying our energy together from through renewable energy credits where we're getting our where we pay our bills. It goes to wind energy generation. So there are all these different great models that we're seeing of making that transition. Out in the West, we see the Black Mesa Water Coalition working with Navajo and other nations, where they're transitioning from the big, dirty coal-fired power plants that were polluting their communities to actually investing and owning large-scale solar arrays in their communities for the Navajo Nation and other nations there. So again, whether it's community-owned solar, whether it's community aggregated purchase, whether it's large solar farms that are done in partnership with utilities, we're seeing this great transition happen, and we hope to see much more. So thank you.
Again, thank you. Thank you so much, Jacqui. United Methodist women are choosing to have communities that are really on the front lines of the environmental injustice be the ones who help us learn and help us determine the new rules for a new economy and a new environment, or at least an environment that is back in the ways that God would have us live. This is revolutionary for an institution, and from most of the other church and religious events I've been at, it's a very unique lens. Jacqui, could you share a bit about some of what these communities have determined might be some of the new rules and policies which could transform these environmental injustices to justice?
Thank you. Absolutely. So there are a number of policies that we need to be looking at putting in place to transition from injustice to justice. Some of them are repelling bad practices, and some of them are supporting the advancement of good practices. So first off, we need increased regulations around how we are generating energy, how we are doing industry, how we're doing waste. So whether it's better regulations around landfill waste, better regulations around emissions from incinerator usage, better regulations around coal ash disposal, and better regulations just generally around clean air, clean water, and the contamination of land. So all of those current rules and regulations are insufficient as it stands. And so we see rampant violations of existing regulations, and we see under-regulations in these various areas. And then further to that point around violations of existing regulations, we also need a better financed EPA so that they are able to, at the federal and state and local level, they are able to monitor and enforce. Because as we see these violations happen, a lot of times it's with impunity because EPA doesn't have the resources it needs to be able to monitor and enforce the infraction. So we absolutely need more on the constraint side, and then on the other side, we need better rules and policies to be able to advance the change that we need. So I talked before about how the Recovery Act funds helped with the development of the workforce development and the retrofitting and weatherization and audits that were done in Los Angeles. Those funds dried up, so we need more funds around energy efficiency and being able to have these different projects around workforce development. So we need appropriations to be able to support that. We also need to have aggressive targets around emissions reduction. Right now we have fairly low targets in terms of emissions reduction, but if we don't aggressively reduce the amount of pollution we're putting out in the air, we're already on a slippery slope where we can't turn back in some ways in terms of some degree of climate change that we're already seeing now. But if we don't aggressively cut back on our emissions, it's just going to get much worse. But we can do it. We've seen other nations that have cut their carbon footprint significantly, and we can do the same if we put those policies in place. We also need policies that will support the transition. So as we know, 40%, as we may or may not know, 40% of our emissions are coming from the energy production process. So if we have renewable portfolio standards that help us that say that a certain percentage of our energy must come from clean sources, then we start to move in that direction of not having the emissions that are driving climate change. So we are pushing for aggressive, and we're actually now looking at, even campaigns are looking at 100% clean energy, and that's the direction we need to be moving towards. And groups like the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, which is a federal agency, have said it is possible to make that transition. We do have enough geothermal heat, we do have enough wind, we do have enough solar to be able to supply our energy needs across the nation. We just need to put the transmission and storage technology in place to make that happen. And so that's another thing that we need is authorization, is appropriations to support the research and development that's needed to help to make that transition. We also, in terms of policy, need energy efficiency resource standards so that states and utilities are pushed, as we said, with Mississippi, they were pushed to put measures in place for energy efficiency, and they went from being the worst ranked nation, the worst ranked state in the nation around energy efficiency, and they moved up several spots after making that change. So we need to see more of that kind of action where utilities are really pushed to innovate. And we see, as I said, with the Roanoke, now they've put on this on-bill financing mechanism. We need to be able to push for more energy efficiency from the utility companies and others. We also need to be looking at tying our energy goals with economic justice goals. So I've given a number of examples of how economic justice is tied in with energy justice issues. And so as a result, as a part of that, we are really focusing on distributed generation or net metering, where folks can, where you and I as homeowners or as renters can actually be owners of our energy infrastructure through solar panels or otherwise. So we need to be supporting that kind of consumer engagement and ownership of our energy infrastructure so that we're decentralizing from the monopolies that utility companies and fossil fuel-based companies hold now, which means that our status quo has existed for all these years and gotten us to where we are today. And then finally, tied to that, we also need to make an effort around looking at this tie with electoral politics and with our political system. And we need to think about the fact that these utility companies and fossil fuel-based energy companies have spend millions of dollars a year to maintain the status quo. That's how we have 76,000 coal miners have died of black lung disease, while year after year the mining industry fought against those regulations. It shouldn't be that companies can fight successfully against regulations that actually would save lives. So we need to be able to reform our political system through campaign finance reform and other measures so that we're getting money out of politics, and so the decision making is actually on behalf of the people as opposed to on behalf of the profits of companies. So campaign finance reform is certainly another strong policy we need to look at putting in place so that we really advance a true democracy. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
Wow, big job, right? Lots of things that we can think about and go forward in. It's all a really, really large task, and it will take dedicated persons of deep self-reflection and deep spirituality and conviction and deep understanding to do this work, and we need one another in order to get into that space. And so over next years in National UMW, we're developing tools and processes by which we can learn together how to work with communities that are facing so many issues and with all the ways we need to influence policy. So many horrendous consequences happen because of the ways we've been taught to live. One of the tools that can happen with us is already up and running. It's our 13 Steps to Sustainability program. You'll hear more about this at National Seminar, and you may have already heard something about it from some of our jurisdictional guides out there. But over the next years, we hope we will all begin to conform to its measurable standards so that we can hold one another accountable in love and affection for all the world's peoples and the planet upon which we live. You can find out more about this from the website that's on the slide. Sustainability is not just a good thing to do. It actually saves people from the health effects of the pollutants that are caused by the industrial processes which we live by. It's a way of intentionally caring for the world around us and all of its communities. We're creating a simulation experience for National Seminar, which we hope will help you understand the very personal effects of health concerns from environmental toxins and help prod our imaginations about what to do about it. And this webinar is the first and the basic tool about this fundamental approach, and it will be available for you to use with your unit, district, conference, or jurisdiction in the toolbox we're creating for our work post-National Seminar 2015. We hope this has been informative and that you will begin to understand or even continue to understand the lens through which UMW is hoping to address the onslaught of environmental injustice that's occurring right now around us. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen, and I look forward to meeting you and working with you as we go forward. Thank you.